Hello and welcome to Week 2, Lesson 8 for ELA Grade 12. My name is Seema and I'll be leading you through this introduction to the distance learning lesson today. We are going to start like we usually do and talk about the materials that you'll need for this lesson. Then I'll give you a brief overview of the learning. I'll do a quick model of some of the reading and thinking and annotating that you'll be doing in this lesson. And then we'll end with a quick preview for what's coming next. To get started, let's do a riddle of the day just to get our brains working a little bit. And today's riddle is on the screen here. What five-letter word becomes shorter when you add two letters to it? Read it again if you have to. Take a minute to think about it. And go ahead and pause the video right now if you're still thinking, because I'm about to put the answer on the screen. Short is the answer. So it's a five-letter word, and if you add two letters to it, the letter E and the letter R, it becomes shorter. Okay. So now then, jumping into our lesson for the day, we are on Lesson 8, which is on page 27 of your learning packet. Um, We also will need today your note catcher for Lesson 8, which is on page 28 of your packet. And then finally, of course, just something to write with is going to be helpful, either a pen or a pencil. The text that you'll need is on pages 17 through 20 of your packet. We're continuing with our reading of A Changing World. We've already completed the first reading of the text, and now we're going to go back and look at some of the text features in more detail today. So that leads us into our learning target, which is I can analyze and interpret features of informational text. And just to review why we're reading this text, we want to increase our background knowledge on the British colonial era, and in particular, looking at these two guiding questions here on the screen. How did British colonialism complicate the idea of home? So we've explored that in our first reading and in our close reading in the previous lesson as well. And today we'll be looking at that question through the information that we gained from some of the text features today. Also thinking about how do key events during this time period relate to finding a home. So the information we learned today is going to give us some more factual knowledge about the colonial era. So just keep these questions in the back of your mind as you're going through today's lesson. So like I mentioned, we will be doing some rereading of features today. So what you'll be rereading is the timeline, and the timeline can be found on the bottom of the different pages of the text. And you're also going to be rereading that specific integration of knowledge and ideas section. That's the section with the map on it, and there's a little bit of text above the map that gives you some guiding questions to think about as you're looking at the graphics there. Once you revisit those sections, your thinking task today will be first to think about the timeline. For the timeline, you're going to be reflecting on the events that were noted on the timeline and how do those events compare with the events that were mentioned in the text. So they're not all similar. I'll just go ahead and give you that part of it. They're not all the same events, so you will see some differences there. So think about what those differences are. Why do you think those differences are there? Why did the author include some events on the timeline and not in the text, and vice versa? So that's what you'll be thinking about after rereading the timeline. Then moving on to the integration of knowledge and ideas part, thinking about the different countries that are represented in the list of Nobel Prize winners. What do you notice when you locate those countries on the top map? And if you have access to a smartphone or another device here, and you need help locating some of those countries on the map, go ahead and use your device here to help you out there. So what I'm going to do here is just show you an example of what your map might look like once you've located some of these countries. So I've underlined A few of the different countries. So you'll see when you're looking at the integration of knowledge and ideas section and you're looking at that list of Nobel Prize winners writing in English, you'll see that a lot of countries are repeated. So what I've done here is underline just some of those countries just to give you a head start and for you to check some of that work there. And then I haven't circled all of them on the map. I want to leave some for you to do, but I did get you started, so I circled a few here on the map. And so this might be what your map starts to look like as you're starting this exercise of your thinking. So you're thinking about where those countries are on the map, and then after that, you're going to be reflecting on what that means about how prevalent the English language was in the former colonies. So you're looking at the map here. The top map represents the British Empire in 1900, and we know from the article about the years when the British Empire began in the Victorian era and when it ended. So looking at all of these countries in red represented the British Empire. We know that people in Britain spoke and then they speak English as their language. And so looking at then these Nobel Prize winners from across the world actually were writing in English, but those countries, their native language might not be English. So how did English get there? So thinking about that connection there and what role and what effect colonialism had on that. Then you're going to be talking with a family member, caregiver, or friend, and your discussion prompt today is about the timeline. So talking about the following questions that you see here. So what trends do you see in the timeline? For example, does everything from the text appear in the timeline? If not, what's missing? And is the timeline a fair reflection of what is represented in the text? So again, kind of just extending what you were thinking about in the think section and just having that conversation with someone and verbalizing those ideas. After your talk, you are going to do some writing as always, and your daily writing today is to answer two questions on your note catcher. Um, the top question is, what conclusions can you draw after comparing the two maps? And then on the bottom there, what can you infer about the prevalence of the English language in the former colonies? So those two questions should be, you talked a little bit about them, you did some thinking a little bit, and so you can use that discussion and thinking to help you write your responses here. Before closing out the lesson and doing your reading and your fluency work, I would like you to share your writing with someone and also to talk about the information that you would have missed if the maps and the timeline had not been included in the text. So text features are important. They do give us some vital information about the text and about the topic of the text. So if those features were not there, what would the reader have missed? What would you not have learned about the topic? Just to preview what's coming up next, so we will spend one more day on this text, and tomorrow in lesson 9 we'll be analyzing the author's use of personification and then connecting the text to the essential question of the unit. If you have questions about this lesson, feel free to email your teacher. Their email address would be their first name dot last name at detroitk12.org. And as I mentioned, don't forget to talk about your lesson with someone and then read for 20 minutes and complete a reading log entry, which is at the front of your packet, and then practice reading fluency using the first or second page of your weekly reading. Thank you for learning with me today, and I look forward to seeing you in our next lesson.